The Hawk That Dare Not Hunt by Day by Scott Odell. Chapter 4. My journey to the Monmouth residence in All Hallows Barking proved to be in vain. Master Tindale was away, and the servant who answered my knock informed me that he was not expected before nightfall. I found him the next morning, however, at St. Dunstan in the west. I was in the church promptly at 11, choosing a place in the back where I could duck out for a breath of fresh air should Tindale's sermon prove dull. As a consequence, I heard little except a small passage toward the end. All rulers, Tindale said, speaking slowly and quietly, yet in a strong voice, whether parents or masters, must be obeyed. At the head of all stands the king. Subjects who rise against him rise against God. If he is cruel and downtreads them, they must bear it in patience and leave all punishment to God. Yet, though kings are supreme, they may not rule as they list. They are servants of the people and must treat every man, no matter how humble, as a brother. Master Tindale's words, and I put them down from memory, but correctly, did not encourage me. Henry VIII was violently against Martin Luther and his teachings. Therefore, Tindale, who believed that the king must be obeyed, would himself be against Luther. Therefore, Tindale would not be interested in buying the manifestos that I carried in my doublet. It was a discouraging prospect. I even thought of leaving the church before the sermon was finished, but though the prospects were poor, I stood around until it was over and accosted Tindale as he left the church. William Tindale was a young-looking man of a slender build, with a curly, sand-colored beard that hid most of his face. He had a high, bold forehead, like a promontory. I told him that I was much taken with his preachment and introduced myself as a seaman who traveled often in Hansa waters to Hamburg and by barge as far east as Wittenberg. Since Luther lived and wrote in Wittenberg, I thought by mentioning the town that I might surprise Tindale into making some comment that would give me a clue as to his sympathies. The ruse worked. Master Tindale was walking rapidly, and I am sure that in a moment, had I not mentioned Wittenberg, he would have left me behind. Upon hearing that name, he instantly slowed his pace. "In Wittenberg," he said, "then you must have seen Martin Luther." The tone of his voice, the reverential way he spoke the name Martin Luther, was all the clue that I needed. "No, alas, I've never had that honor," I said, "but I do have a message from him." Tindale paused and waited for me to speak further, but the street was crowded with people leaving St. Dunstan's, and I didn't wish to be overheard. We were opposite the Three Swans, an inn in nearby Anchor Lane, so I suggested that we repair there forthwith, to which Master Tindale agreed. I was not a frequenter of this place, though I had on occasion been here, preferring instead the Anchor and Chain, a lively inn close by the river. But when one was bent upon business, the Three Swans was an ideal meeting place. The clientele was mostly respectable. Mistress Tremont, the owner's wife, greeted me at the door. She was as thin as her husband was stout, a mere wraith of a woman, scarcely discernible in the dark shadows of the inn. "Master Tom?" she asked, examining me carefully. "You have grown since I saw you last. You must be a head taller, and filled out in the chest, too." "Taller, it seems," I said, striking my head on a low rafter. There was an oak serving counter just inside the door where Master Tremont presided in a dun-colored apron. He called out a greeting, and Mistress Tremont led us into a room with 3 tables, very small and lit by a ship's lantern riding in brass gimbals. Mistress Tremont brought us each something to drink, and since I had had a long dry hour in the church, I drank my cup in a single quaff. Master Tindale, on the other hand, did not touch his cup until he had learned from me that indeed Luther had published a tract within the last month, and that some copies of it were now in London. I did not say that I had 20 upon my person, or that 200 more were in my locker aboard the ship. I still was not sure of Tyndale's sympathies. "Have you read the tract?" he asked me. "No," I said. As a matter of fact, I could not read, not a line, but I hesitated to confess my ignorance. Tindale had a sharp, bodkin gaze, and he now fastened it upon me. It was plain that he could not conceive of anyone who could carry around a new Martin Luther tract and not take the time to read it. "What is the price?" he asked. "They are to sell for 2 shillings 6 each." "The price is high." "So is the risk, sir." Tindale wore a gray woolen gown, clean but threadbare. His shoes were well worn. Obviously he was poor. In the more than 10 years that I was to know him, his shoes were always worn, and his gowns always made of wool. 2 shillings, he said. 2 and 6, I replied firmly, having no taste for a bad bargain just because of his poverty. "What if I can help you dispose of the lot?" he asked. "In that case, sir, I'll give you a copy gratis." I addressed him as sir, though he appeared to be still in his early 30s, not much more than 15 years older than I. A special copy that carries Luther's own signature. "I can furnish you the names of 2 men who deal in books," he said. "Robert Martin at Charing Cross is one. Peter Larson at St. Paul's Priory is the other, but I can't guarantee what either man will do. I'll see them tomorrow. Should I mention your name?" "It is better not. You are aware that there is a severe penalty for dealing in Lutheran literature." "Yes," I said, remembering well the scene of yesterday, the 5 men degraded in the square at St. Paul's, the angry man I had talked to. "By chance, do you know a gentleman who calls himself Belsey? Herbert Belsey, a tall man with a pale, turned-up nose?" "I know who he is. Why do you ask?" "I encountered him yesterday morning at St. Paul's. A crowd was burning books, and he was there, cheering it on." "I heard about the burning. I was going to speak about it this morning at St. Dunstan's, but decided against it. What happened between you and Belsey?" "I was watching the spectacle when of a sudden he came up behind me shouting, 'Burn the lice, burn the lice.' I asked him who the lice were, and he promptly told me." "Disciples of the devil," Tindale said. "Disciples of Martin Luther, the devil himself." "Exactly to the word," I replied. "The last time I was here, 2 months ago now, Belsey followed my uncle, the ship's captain, from place to place." "Who is he? Is he a spy working for the king? For Sir Thomas More, or what?" "None at all," Tindale said. "First off, Belsey belongs to a sect of Capelclars, a group small in numbers, but fanatical. They believe that the king favors Lutheranism, and so have taken upon themselves to punish those their anger fastens upon. For one thing, they make a habit of meeting ships, especially those from Germany. The spying upon your captain and upon you yourself at St. Paul's is a common practice." "My uncle will trim Belsey's ears one of these days," I said confidently, having first hand knowledge of Uncle Jack's anger and strength of limb. It's best to leave Belsey alone. His sect has powerful ties to the church and can do you harm. Furthermore, he's a searcher, a new one, in the employ of the collector of customs. I am surprised that you haven't encountered him before this. Uncle Jack and I knew many searchers now and in the past, most of them by their real names, but not this Herbert Belsey. He was truly a new one to me, as he would be to my uncle. For most of 2 years now, the Port of London had hired men to go up and down the Thames, searching out all the ships that move cargoes, such as corn and wool and coins of the realm, whose export was prohibited by the king. All goods smuggled in and out of the country were subject to seizure. The owners of these cargoes, if caught and convicted, were fined, half of the fine going into the searcher's pocket. There was also a group of searchers who spied on the searchers. It's best to leave Belsey alone, Tindale said. He can do you harm. Tindale sat on the edge of his bench as if he intended to get up and leave it any moment, with the air of a man only half interested in what he was saying. I glanced about me. In the next room, there was some sort of a quarrel. Master Tremont was in the act of striking a drunken customer a sharp blow between the shoulder blades. There was no one in the room where we sat. Reaching into my doublet, I drew out the Luther manifestos. Slipped one out of the packet. I handed it over and put the rest back. Tindale hid the tract away without glancing at it. In Wittenberg, Tindale said, as Mistress Tremont held the door open while her husband tossed the bowsy customer without being badgered, the bowsy customer into Anchor Lane. There in Wittenberg, Martin Luther can work without being badgered and spied upon. That's not true in London. I've been here for most of a year, and scarce a week goes by that I am not interfered with in some way by one of the numerous fanatics. Our Master Belsey is among them. I don't know whether you saw him, but he was in the congregation at St. Dunstan's this morning. I didn't see him. He was present nonetheless, his ears cocked to hear every sentence, searching for a word or a phrase that he might object to and report. Each time I preach, he is present, that he might object to. There are others also, many others, who come to listen and report. Tindale got to his feet, leaving most of his drink untouched. There is nothing for me to do except leave London, he said. I have work to do, and I cannot do it here. It can be done in Hamburg or in Wittenberg, where scholars are protected. We sail for Hamburg next Friday, I said. We don't usually take passengers. They're a nuisance mostly. However, I'll be traveling with only a light parcel of books and the clothes I stand in. It won't hurt to talk to my uncle, I said. He's aboard now. Come along and talk to him. You might ship on as one of the crew. We're short 3 men. I doubt that I would make much of a sailor. Up to average, I said, though looking at his thin wrists, I had my own doubts. As we stepped out of the tavern into Anchor Lane, a trace of sun shone overhead, but a keen southwester wind was blowing. A group of men stood at some distance farther up the lane. Among them, I made out the lank figure hunched against the cold of Herbert Belsey. He was watching us. As I closed the door and as we turned towards the Thames, his gaze was still upon us. When we reached the dock, I learned from the cook that Uncle Jack had gone ashore on urgent business, so Master Tindale and I parted with the understanding that he would return the following night. Take care, Tindale warned me. There are many Belsies on the streets and docks of London. Tindale, despite the small difference in our ages, gave me a warm, fatherly look. The look that an anxious father might give a headstrong son. Since we had known each other for an hour or less, it surprised me. It was likewise embarrassing, being something that I was not accustomed to from anyone, not from my Uncle Jack or even from my own father. I was too surprised and embarrassed to answer him. End of chapter 4.